Welcome to Holistic Health for Happy Kids, the podcast where we dive into the root causes of children's health challenges and explore natural solutions to help little ones thrive. I'm Lisa, a passionate paediatric naturopath and mum of 3, dedicated to empowering parents with practical tips and expert insights to raise healthy, happy kids. Each episode will unpack common childhood health concerns like allergies, eczema, fussy eating, and gut health, and share evidence-based advice to support your child's wellness naturally. Let's create a generation of thriving children, one holistic step at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Hello and welcome to today's Holistic Health for Happy Kids podcast. And today the topic is eczema. So we're going to be talking about eczema and the microbiome. So I'm joined today by one of the practitioners here at the Paediatric Naturopath, and that is Summer Kamia. And she is one of our eczema specialists. So hello, Summer. Thank you for joining me here today.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome. Happy to be here.
So tell me a bit about yourself and how you ended up being a holistic nutritionist.
Okay. So I'm a mum of 2 kids. I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. We live on the Gold Coast, and I think something that we all love to do together is going out to eat, exploring different foods. So food's a big part of our life. And I suppose it always has been from the start, because I put a lot of emphasis on whole foods when I had my kids. To give you a bit of information behind that, we need to go back a bit of a few years before that. So when I came out of uni, I got a job overseas teaching English in Japan, and I only meant to stay there for a year, but I ended up being there 7 years. It was a lot of fun. It was really lovely to be there, but I did go through a couple of health issues when I was there. And I suppose a lot of natural health practitioners have this kind of story behind them. And I really looked at what I could do to improve my health, and I went to food, and I cleaned up my diet, went to whole foods, and I suppose that was a big reason why when I had my kids, I chose to do it that way. I didn't want them to kind of go through some of the same health issues that I did. And so I was a language teacher in Japan. When we moved back to Australia, it kind of wasn't really my passion anymore. And I was putting so much work into learning about food, learning about nutrition and health. I thought, I may as well make a career out of it. So I sent myself back to school. I got a Bachelor of Health degree in Clinical Nutrition, and this is where I am now.
Yes, awesome. And it's a lot of us, I guess, have had a first career and then have come to this as a second career, as kind of life has unfolded for us.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, you're one of our sort of skin experts. And what a lot of people don't realize is that what happens on the skin is often, as a result of what's happening in your gut. So do you want to explain for us what is the gut microbiome and why it is so important for kids' health, including their skin?
I see a lot of eczema kids, and I suppose before we go into this, the gut plays a really big role, but I need to remind everyone that eczema is a pretty complex condition. There are lots of factors involved, and one of them can be the gut. And the gut microbiome, what is it? Well, the gut microbiome is this collection of microorganisms. They're mainly bacteria, but there's also viruses, fungi, and other microbes. And they live in the digestive tract, mainly lower down in the large intestine. And these microbes, they play a really critical role in maintaining various aspects of our health, despite being invisible to the naked eye. One big role for children's health is digestion. Well, everyone's health, really. But one big role they play is in digestion. And you can think of the gut like a garden, and the gut bacteria as the gardeners, helping everything grow and stay healthy. They break down tough materials like gardeners do when they're composting. So they break these hard to digest parts of food like fiber down into useful substances that our body can use for energy. They also help produce helpful nutrients like B vitamins and vitamin K, just like a gardener would use fertilizer to grow plants. So helping our bodies to grow. They help absorb minerals like calcium and iron more effectively, just like the gardeners prepare the soil so the plant roots can soak up water and minerals better. And they protect the gut. Just like the gardeners keep the harmful weeds and pests out, the good gut bacteria help maintain a strong gut wall, and they keep the harmful microbes in check so that the nutrient garden stays balanced. So in short, this garden of digestion, your gut bacteria are the hard-working gardeners. They break things down, they add nutrients, they improve absorption, and they protect the whole system. This is important for many areas of our body, our immune system and our skin, because what we're absorbing via the gut is helping us grow and be as healthy as possible.
That's probably the clearest description of the gut microbiome that I have ever heard, because we talk about it all the time, but we don't actually really sit down and think about the different roles that all the different bacteria and stuff are performing. So that's lovely. And that's something that you can also explain to kids quite well as well. You should write a book, Summer, because that's something that would really break it down for kids, why it's so important.
Yeah, and I think it really helps too when kids get to a certain age that the parents have this knowledge and they can explain it to their kids so that they can get an idea that there's things going on inside that we need to look after. It's not just put food in our mouth and hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've heard a lot of people talk about the gut-skin axis. So what do people mean when they say gut-skin axis?
So the gut is connected to many parts of the body through what is known as gut axes, and one of them is the gut skin axis. So this is a pathway where the gut sends and receives signals to the skin to help keep everything in balance. So we know that the health of our gut can affect the skin via this pathway. So before, when I was talking about the garden and the gardener, we were talking about a strong gut wall and how the good bacteria keep this strong. A healthy gut has a nice tight wall with small spaces between each brick that allows the good stuff in and keeps the bad stuff out. If we don't have enough of the good guys and too many of the bad guys, we can end up with a leaky wall, or what people know as leaky gut. The cement between the bricks start to crack, leaving big gaps with things that shouldn't pass through, such as toxins, harmful bacteria, and undigested food. When this happens, our immune system reacts because it sees these things as invaders. It sends an alert out to the rest of the body that the body is under attack, to look out for this invader. The gut may be the one that's exposed to this threat, but it sends these signals out via these pathways known as the axes, such as the gut skin axes, to alert them to be aware. They send these messages through the blood, through these pathways, and these signals can alert the immune systems that live in the skin to then be activated, to then respond. And the chemicals that these immune cells release can weaken the skin barrier, making it dry and irritated, can trigger itching, which leads to scratching and more damage. And these are the typical signs that we can see in things like eczema, and how the gut can affect the skin.
And so that's when people talk about leaky gut, that's what they're talking about with the bricks moving far apart. So obviously leaky gut then directly contributes to eczema and inflammation in the skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when people talk about dysbiosis and that correlation to eczema, what do people mean when they're talking about dysbiosis?
So dysbiosis is when we're getting this imbalance in the microbiome. We're getting a increased number of pro-inflammatory bacteria, and these pro-inflammatory bacteria can release substances that are irritating at the gut wall, which can affect the immune system and can be chronic enough to then disrupt the gut wall, leading to it to become leakier.
So everything's intertwined, like the immune system, leaky gut, dysbiosis. It's all kind of intertwined, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
A lot of people find that their eczema is triggered by what they eat as well. Well, not as much, because obviously what you eat is directly related to your gut health. But what are the sort of the common gut irritants that you see in clients which affects their eczema?
So some common things that I see would have to be dairy, gluten. A child who's consuming foods that they know they're allergic to is a common thing as well. That's a tricky area to go into with parents sometimes, because they get told by their allergist to keep the food in their diet, which can be an important thing to develop food tolerance and reduce that allergenicity to that food. But we can see that it contributes to their eczema. So that's a common food area that I see as well. And then I suppose there's also a group of foods known as high histamine foods, which I commonly see irritating a child's gut, contributing to that leakiness and contributing to the eczema.
And I think what I always worry about is that yes, there are often clear food triggers for people with their eczema, but sometimes when people try and work this out on their own, they just keep chopping away and removing food after food after food to try and get to the solution. Whereas if you work on your gut health and your leaky gut and dysbiosis and the immune dysregulation at the same time, you end up not having to cut out all those foods. You might still have to cut out one or two select foods, but it's a lot more strategic.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
And yeah, the thing about when children are allergic to food, they will often be told to keep it in their diet at a low level for the tolerance, which of course I should say is important. But if you've got eczema and you've got an impaired skin barrier and you're eating the food, having that impaired skin barrier is actually a bad thing for allergies as well. So you'd be better off to just cut out the food for a set amount of time and really heal up the skin before you reintroduce it.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, are aware that dairy and gluten are a good place to start. Are there any food sensitivities that parents are often surprised about and haven't thought about when it comes to eczema and gut inflammation?
Yeah, actually, I remember a client who seemed to be reacting to a lot of sulfur-rich veggies like broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, which is not something I commonly see, but it was a really big trigger for her. So that's one example.
And that would be hard to work out on your own, wouldn't you? Wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
and a lot of these foods are really healthy, and people try their best to have a healthy diet and a varied diet, and yeah. Key thing there though is a lot of eczema kids have gut issues as well, either constipation or loose stools. If they're not so great with these sulfur-rich foods, they often have smelly gas.
Yeah. And I think if you're not good with those sulfur-rich foods, you need to investigate why. So is it a nutrient deficiency? Is it a gut issue? Like, because those foods shouldn't be a problem.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct.
So are there any nutrients that are really important for your gut and your skin? And how would you know? So like I saw a child yesterday who'd come to see me from a different practitioner and they were on, I would say 20 to 25 different supplements. And no doubt each supplement is good for something, but it wasn't, again, not very strategic. What what nutrients do you like to use and how do you work out which ones to use for the child in front of you?
Mm. Age is a factor there. The younger the child, the less I like to do, and the more kind of gut work I like to prioritize. Looking at other kind of signs of deficiencies in nutrients, such as behavior issues, everything feeds into it. I think zinc's a big player at times, especially if there's a lot more going on for the child with behavior or even digestion, if there's signs of real kind of inefficient upper digestive capacity, or if a child's been on PPIs for a really long time. It's really individual, but zinc does come up a lot. And zinc's one of those things that plays such a big role in everything, such as making sure we've got sufficient stomach acid. If we're not digesting our food properly, we're ending up with undigested proteins in the gut. If a child's already sensitive to things and the immune system's on alert, they've got a leaky gut, that's just going to make things worse. Zinc's really important in immune regulation, in skin regeneration, and also gut barrier integrity. So a special type of zinc called zinc carnosine is really helpful in keeping that gut wall nice and tight if there has been a history of damage.
And another term that I hear talked about a lot with gut health is short chain fatty acids. And so how do short chain fatty acids fit into like inflammation and the skin barrier?
So short chain fatty acids are the products that beneficial bacteria make when they digest the hard to digest things like fibers. There's a couple of them. A big one for eczema is something called butyrate. So that's one type of short chain fatty acid. And butyrate's been found to play a really crucial role in the gut as an anti-inflammatory substance, but also in the skin. So butyrate can be shifted off to other areas of the body, such as skin, and have that anti-inflammatory effect. Butyrate also feeds the intestinal cells. So it's their primary source of energy to make sure that that gut wall is nice and secure. And there's also some evidence that butyrate can increase ceramide. And ceramide is this type of fat that's really high in the skin, and it enables the skin to have this secure skin barrier function, and have good hydration levels, which is really
interesting. And ceramide is often in like face creams, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of even eczema targeted creams out there that have ceramide in them. So we know the benefits of ceramide, and this is a really great way, gut-wise, to try and improve the body's own ability to make ceramides. Yeah.
Because if you talk to many sort of conventional medicine people, they will say eczema is a defect of your moisture in your skin, and that's it. So it is a defect of the moisture in your skin, plus all the other things. But if you just think about that one side of the story, the defective moisture, then eating lots of fruits and vegetables, producing lots of ceramide in your gut will actually help to restore that moisture level in your skin.
Yeah, definitely. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But there are lots of other things too. So it's never one thing. There can also be genes involved in reducing that skin barrier function and from acting appropriately as well. So a lot of things do come into consideration. But yeah, it was interesting to learn about butyrate and how it can support the skin.
Yeah. And I mean, the kids that we see are generally the kids that come to see us are the ones that eat a lot of white pasta, white rice, white bread, white crackers, and very little fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes. So therefore, they're not making short chain fatty acids, are they? Because there's no food. It's the hard to digest food that actually creates the short chain fatty acids. Yeah. Which is why I think historically so much about healthy eating has been to do with weight and weight control. And that's, it misses so much of the point of what fruits and vegetables actually do for you, like including helping your skin. And then what about probiotics and prebiotics? Are there certain probiotics or prebiotics that are also really useful?
Yeah, so as a food you're talking about?
As a food or as a supplement?
Yeah, so look, Probiotics you can find naturally in fermented foods, which are a great source of both your fiber-rich plants plus the additional benefit of the bacteria that are in there. So we can get probiotics that way. I mentioned the high histamine foods earlier. Fermented foods can be high in histamine, so it's not great for everyone. Try small amounts, see how the skin behaves. If everything's great, then great, continue with that. Prebiotics is what obviously we were talking about before, what these beneficial bacteria feed off. This is what supports their growth and activity. And they're found in so many different plant foods. It doesn't have to be a piece of vegetable, which, can be a bit tricky for some of the fussy eaters. It can be found in nuts and seeds and different types of grains and legumes and fruits. In particular, if you really want to go for some of the top prebiotic foods, we'd be looking at leeks and onions and garlic, asparagus, rye, legumes, chia seeds, flax seeds, sunflower seeds. So there's quite a variety. Obviously, the bigger variety, the better. We're going to be feeding so many different microbes in the gut by doing that. But starting, with a few at a time and building is a really great place to go.
Because in an ideal world, you would be aiming for 40 of those different foods every week, which sounds extremely overwhelming. But if you plan out your week and plan out what goes in your kids' lunchbox, what goes in their dinner, what goes in breakfast, you can actually get to 40. And then, as you say, the more different foods, the more different bacteria, the happier your garden grows. And are there any particular strains of probiotic that you do like to use?
So I do often use Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG. There's a lot of research in its ability to prevent eczema. And the reason why I use it for a child with eczema is that immune regulation. So I don't think we really specifically have spoken about that immune regulation part of the picture yet. So the microbiome plays a really big part in immune regulation. So making sure that we learn appropriately what's considered safe and what's considered harmful. And when we have that dysbiosis, we can have skewed responses and the immune system starts to overreact, which is essentially at the root of where the immune system goes astray in eczema.
Yeah.
LGG plays a really great role in calming that immune system down.
Yeah.
Being able to bring it back, not excessively overreact when it shouldn't.
And that's why they've done a lot of studies about that particular probiotic and doing the oral immune therapy with peanuts.
Yeah, we have.
And the kids who took that probiotic and did the peanuts oral immunotherapy did a lot better and had a lot longer lasting results than the ones that didn't.
Definitely. And something interesting I've had with a client who has a known food allergy and the eczema as well. We've had that probiotic in, and each time she goes back for a skin prick test, it actually reduces. And there was a period of time where she wasn't on the probiotic, and actually, there was an elevated response. So that was interesting data to listen to.
And so in an ideal world, we'll be sitting down, we'll be eating our 40 different fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds every week. But what about supplemental prebiotics? Because they can be extremely easy to get into kids because they're sort of mildly sweet white powders that kind of dissolve. Do you use many prebiotic supplements?
Yeah, I do. I do use them. As I said earlier, there's often some gut things going on, especially if there's constipation. I like to use prebiotics for sure, especially something called partially hydrolyzed guaraga. And we know that it might be hard to get a child to eating a wide variety of foods. That's our foundation, but to kind of get the ball rolling and give a bit more of a therapeutic effect, I do like to use prebiotics. Yeah.
And the fermented food things is interesting because you think about the commonly used fermented foods, so yogurt, kefir. Obviously, if a child's got a dairy problem, you can't have those. Then you've got, sauerkraut. Then if you were the child who doesn't tolerate cabbage, you can't have that. It's all the histamine. There's so many layers to all of if you just Google what to do about eczema and you got a list of 10 things, there's so much nuance in each one for each specific child. Makes it quite tricky.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, simple cases, there's just one food trigger. More complex cases, chronic eczema, chronic gut issues, that makes it a lot trickier, and kids will be reacting to quite a number of things. And sometimes just taking out those big players helps us identify a couple of things that are still kind of tricky. And the important thing there is, it's important to take the load off the immune system so it's not constantly firing all the time. And then we can go in, use these strategies to calm the immune system, build the microbiome to a more beneficial profile so that when we bring those foods back in, there's less risk of a child reacting to them.
Yeah, so it might not be a lifelong thing. It might be for like 6 months, a year that you would have to take out some of those foods, or how long?
Sometimes it doesn't even have to be that.
Okay.
So a couple of months, 6 months. Usually it's a gradual, so they'll start tolerating foods again after 8 to 12 weeks. We might be not able to bring everything back, but over time, it's not a complete elimination of those foods for huge amounts of time. But again, it's what's going on. Is it a true allergy? Is it a delayed immune reaction, or is it just leaky gut? It really depends on those factors as to what time frame I'm removing these foods for.
So are there common mistakes that parents make when they're trying to clean up their child's diet for eczema that actually will backfire in the long run?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I suppose, like we were just talking about, even healthy foods can trigger a reaction. So people might have, an idea to cut out processed foods, but then they start increasing a child's intake of things like yogurt, and we know how dairy can be such a common issue for some kids. So I think that may be where things go wrong. And again, the fermented foods, a lot of information out there on the internet talks about fermented foods and how great it's for the gut. So I think that's also something that I commonly see in people adding bone broth to everything, or even adding these supplemental powders that have fermented ingredients. That can be some common issues.
Because everybody has a bucket for histamines, and if you're giving your child just way too many histamines, that is just going to fill their bucket way too quickly and get the symptoms.
And that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
It might be consuming a small amount of histamine for a period of time, high histamine foods for a period of time, and there's no symptoms. And then one day they'll be having, I think I had this child who had 3 bananas and sauerkraut and bone broth all in one day, and then boom, the flare comes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's going on? And thinking that they've got these foods in their diet all the time, but it's just the quantity. Like you said, with that bucket filled up so quickly, the body wasn't able to keep up with moving that histamine out of the gut. The bucket overflows, and that's where the eczema flares.
Another thing that people will often say when we're talking about histamines is they'll cook a meal one day and everybody will eat it and nobody have symptoms. Then they stick the leftovers in the fridge, and 3 days later they have the same meal and everybody symptoms flares, and that's because the histamines have built up over time. So it's the same food but just different chemical content. Are there any really memorable success stories of a child whose eczema really improved when you looked at their gut health?
Yeah, quite a number. So I'll give you 2 cases to kind of give you an idea of the spectrum that I see. So a simpler case, whereas the factors contributing to eczema weren't as many. So they had this little 8-month-old boy. He was put on formula early. Mum had trouble breastfeeding. So from 2 months of age, he was put on dairy formula. This is where things kind of took a turn for the worse for his health, both his gut and his skin. So he started breaking out in eczema, but he also went from passing a daily stool to going only once every 2 to 4 days, and he was in a lot of pain, straining. So yeah, kids at this age can drop their stool frequency, but when they're in a lot of pain, and he was waking up distressed at night, passing a lot of gas. He was just a very irritable kid. So this is what was going on for him about 2 months of age. He already was born with compromised skin barrier, with really dry skin. A lot of things were irritating him, such as creams and blankets and clothing, which kind of further added to the whole problem and the immune dysregulation. So when she came and saw me, he was 8 months old. Mum just didn't know where to go, and his constipation was just getting worse and worse. It was starting to affect his appetite for solids. He was refusing a lot of foods. He was actually preferring dairy foods as well, which is making the problem unknowingly to Mum worse. So, yeah, it was pretty clear to me that we needed to try removal of the dairy. So Mum was happy to switch to a non-dairy formula. And within about 2 to 3 weeks, he was back to doing a stool daily, even twice daily. And then a week or so after that, his eczema was pretty much gone. So that was amazing. And that's kind of a simpler case.
Yeah.
And you were asking about how long to keep things out. For this little boy, we actually started reintroducing dairy again about 6 to 8 weeks later. We did do some basic gut work, being formula fed. We often see the gut microbiome kind of developing in a different way. So I was adding in some things to make sure we were optimizing a certain type of bacteria in his gut called bifidome, which we really want high in kids this age. So working on that, we were actually able to bring back yogurt first, and he was okay with it. And then I think 2 months after we pulled dairy out, Mum started bringing in a little bit of other forms of dairy, and his stools were fine. He was tolerating it, and his eczema didn't return. So that was a really interesting case. And for me, I think dairy was more of a play of slowing down that gut, dysregulating that gut microbiome, creating a lot of inflammation, and just giving that gut some time to rest and trying to balance out the microbiome really helped this little one.
Yeah. So that was the easy case. So what about the more complex case?
So complex case, I think when the child gets older, there's a lot more compounding factors going on, and additional things that can occur in the gut left unchecked. So I had this 3-year-old little girl come to me. She had recently had a huge flare in response to a respiratory infection. So just to give you a bit of a backstory, her eczema started around the same time, at about 6 months of age, with solids introduction. Different to the first case I talked about, she was breastfed. And Mum was still breastfeeding her even when I was seeing her. So she's getting all the beneficial things that breast milk has to offer in guiding the gut immune system towards what it should be to be able to tolerate foods. But for her, back then at solids introduction, she was actually reacting to those sulfur foods that I was speaking about before. Mum had studied a bit about food and nutrition, and she was pretty cluey that, every time I give her this, she seems to be reacting. So she pulled out those sulfur veggies, specifically, I think it was broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, and her skin almost cleared. There's only a few patches here and there, which were kind of there continuously up until I saw her. They would flare with respiratory infections as well. That was one thing that Mum had noticed. But this was the biggest flare she had, and it was a pretty bad infection to the chest, and then it was just lingering for a really, really long time. So when I had a chat to her, we also found out that stools had changed since the respiratory infection as well. So it seemed like her gut was under a bit of inflammation, and this can occur when we have respiratory infections. We were talking about the gut-skin axis earlier. There's also communication happening between the respiratory tract and the gut, and we can actually see a temporary leaky gut occurring during a respiratory infection. This comes from the research that they did with COVID. So we can become kind of sensitive to certain foods. So with her, we did a bit of a diet diary, and we were noticing that she was reacting to dairy, but also high histamine foods now. So we pulled those foods out, did a bit of general gut work, adding in beneficial foods, adding in some probiotics and prebiotics. Then we attempted to bring the foods back, and I like to do this around the 4 to 6 week mark. And she was still reacting to a whole bunch of foods. So mum was happy to go ahead with a stool test, and a functional stool test can be really beneficial when we kind of run into a bit of trouble to get things back on track easily. It kind of gives us a clear picture of what's going on. And the results came back that she had quite a number of pro-inflammatory bacteria in there. Some of them were actually producing histamine themselves. We were talking about that histamine bucket earlier. This is another source of histamine. So her bucket was just overflowing constantly. It was really hard for her to get things under control. So we kind of brought in strategies to clear those pro-inflammatory bacteria. And I think we probably did a lot of gut work for about 8 weeks. And that's when we tried to bring foods back in. And she was able to bring things back in smoothly. And the only thing we couldn't get in was tomatoes. So that's something we're still working on. But that's, a bit of a more complex case, which we found doing a functional stool test for really helped us get across and see some benefits.
And so the food sensitivity was a downstream effect of the overgrowth of bacteria in her gut.
Yeah, and interestingly, that bacteria is also connected to respiratory infections as well. Yeah.
Wow. And so if you had one last piece of advice about, great nutrients to consider, or what parents should do if they're feeling overwhelmed with eczema, what would that be?
I spoke about zinc earlier. I think 2 really important things are also omega-3 fatty acids. So making sure that we're getting a really good intake of those from fatty fish, sardines, or even plant foods like flax seeds and chia seeds. Our diet, the standard Australian diet, is really heavy in omega-6 fats from meats and dairy and plant oils, and also those bad hydrogenated fats and trans fats that we get in packaged foods. And when we see this imbalance, that can really affect how the immune system behaves and how inflammation is created. And omega-3 fatty acids are really important for hydrating that skin. Yeah. So that would be another food area I think it would be important to prioritize. And vitamin D, sunshine. People forget about the importance of sunshine. And living in Australia, we're kind of drummed in that we need to protect ourselves from the sun. But, sunscreen blocks our ability to make vitamin D. And if we're living in the southern parts of Australia, we're not even yet accessing that optimal vitamin D as it is. So I'm talking about safe short bursts of sun, and vitamin D really plays a key role in this because it helps, again, that immune system to behave normally, calm it down, prevent it from overreacting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Summer. I've learned a lot today. So Summer is one of our clinical practicing nutritionists here at the Paediatric Naturopath. And Summer specializes in eczema, but also things like constipation and fussy eating as well. So as we've kind of, talked about a lot, it's really hard to do this on your own without somebody who knows the big picture and somebody who's worked with many, many children in the same situation. So if you would like help with your child's eczema, jump online at thepediatricnaturopath.com.au and go to the Book Now link, and you'll find the link to book an appointment there with Summer, one of our nutritionists. So thank you, Summer, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks for tuning in to Holistic Health for Happy Kids. I hope you found today's episode helpful and inspiring on your journey to raise thriving, healthy little ones. Remember, small, consistent changes can lead to big transformations. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at the Paediatric Naturopath for more tips, tools, and inspiration. If you've got a question or a topic you'd love to hear about, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care and keep supporting your kids in the most natural, nurturing ways possible.